that time, it was the 1950s. Goose Tatum was a star for the Harlem Globetrotters. People started to shout out Goose, a nickname that stayed with him for many years, and in fact, sometimes in the family we still use that nickname. By the way, he did not always stay the underdog. He had a growth spurt in high school and became a starter on the high school football team. Another example of someone who was at first ignored, we see in the first reading from the first book of Samuel. God directs the prophet Samuel to place in Jesse and tells him to anoint one of his sons to become king, a great honor. Jesse prepared a feast and then presented 7 of his sons to the prophet Samuel. God rejected them all. "Is this all of your sons?" Samuel asked. "No, my youngest is out tending my flock," said Jesse, and Samuel said, "Bring him to me." Samuel looked on David, a comely youth, and says, "This is the Lord's chosen." And he anointed David right then. And we are reminded that man sees the appearance, God looks into the heart. From that day on, the Lord was with David, even though his family had ignored him. Yet we know the joy he experienced by serving God faithfully with joy throughout his life. In the Gospel passage, Jesus passed by seeing a man blind from birth. The disciple asked, "Who sinned, this man or his parents?" And Jesus said, "Neither. It is so that the power of God might be made visible." And then Jesus took a very earthly gesture. He spat on the ground, made clay, spread it on the man's eyes, and said, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent, which he did. And he returned able to see. Then his neighbors and the Pharisees got involved in the situation, and they became indignant because Jesus broke the Sabbath by making clay. They called Jesus a sinful man. Yet it was they who could not see the action of God made visible in their midst. They pushed the man, asking, "Who is this man who cured you, who healed you?" And the formerly blind man said simply, "He is a prophet." They questioned his parents, who admitted his blindness from birth, but did not want to antagonize the Pharisees. "Who is he?" they answered. And they said, the parents said, "He is old enough, you ask him." They continued, the Pharisees, to question the man, who finally said, "I've already told you. Do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciple too?" They ridiculed him, invoked Moses, and said this man was a sinner because he followed Jesus and not Moses. Then they threw him out, another underdog. Jesus sought him out and engaged him in conversation, which ended with the man's confession of faith. "I do believe, Lord," and he worshipped the Lord. He came to know the joy of believing. Jesus made the lesson explicit. "I came into the world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind." Who truly saw in this event? Clearly, the man born blind, rather than those righteous are underdogs, disadvantaged in our own society, which is increasingly caught up in itself. While we may have our own blind spots, perhaps truths we do not want to face about ourselves or our situation, perhaps personal weaknesses or family problems, we must turn to Jesus, that we might see and believe and be healed or strengthened. Faith in Jesus is our joy and our strength. We open our eyes and our hearts to the Lord. Then we can see the grave problems undermining our society, our families, and our own self, our own lives. Our society promotes, and many are embracing, a me-centered existence. What I want or am attracted to is moral for me. Usually, the easier road happens to be what makes me feel good. They would ridicule us and throw us out, as it were, as the Pharisees did the blind man. The media leads the society in marginalizing believers. Yet it is God's world in which we live. He has loved us so much that He made us in His image. Through Jesus Christ and the Scriptures and the apostolic teaching of the Church rooted in them, we can know what is in accord with human dignity. Our call is to upright and noble living a truly human life, not to follow a baser, self-centered, and self-serving way. They ridicule our most sacred and most fundamental beliefs, which are nonetheless true. And they also ridicule our most tender beliefs. Just this week, a vicious and scandalous and offensive work was reported without criticism in a local newspaper. Cole Koibin writes, we are told, about getting inside women's heads. He has now written a one-woman show about to open on Broadway or right off Broadway. It is called The Testament of Meyer and is a direct attack on our Most Holy Mother. He imagines the Blessed Mother as a contemporary feminist. She runs away from the crucifixion to save herself, saying, the pain is his, not mine. She misses sleeping with her husband, Joseph. She disdains the misfits who flocked around her song. She resents the two disciples who cared for her after the death of Jesus and resents their pressuring her to help mythologize Jesus as the Son of God. How far have we come when an admitted Irishman living an immoral life can effectively demean and ridicule our Lord, His Blessed Mother, the Church, and all of our teachings and beliefs to make money or to gain notoriety. We do see the power of the evil one. And in our societal life, we see increasing disorder and immorality. Elected leaders, national, state, or local, who promote such immoral agendas should lead us to realize that they are symptoms. Those who vote for them are at the root of the problem. And that represents democracy at its weakest. We should not cower. We should think big. When I take people on pilgrimage or speak to seminarians or prospective seminarians, I often say, pray for big things. Pray for our families and loved ones, for our society, for we may become saints. St. Paul urges us in the second reading to live as children of the light. In that way, we will find joy to take no part in the fruitless works of darkness. Rather, we will expose them, for it is shameful to even mention the things done by them in secret. And he says, "Awake, O sleeper, and Christ will give you light. In him we find our joy."